Dear Traveler, lately I've been feeling homesick. I say this for lack of a better word. I haven't felt a deep and wistful longing. I'm not thinking of my favorite childhood foods or the lilac bush outside my house, nor the little river and the ring of fairy stumps in the woods. This is a sort of sickness that sits closer to anger and far-flung dreams than any common homesickness. This feeling is part sadness for what my home could have been, love for what it is, and anger at how hard others have tried to cut away at what it could be. I finished a book recently where the author wrote with the same fury and wishing, their feelings frenetic and mixed up like fireflies in a jar. Like me, she came from a home that others encouraged her to abandon. To leave, she wrote, is to demonstrate our ambition, to be something other than dependent and stubborn. Reading this, I was hit with a homesickness of a kind I had not felt in years. I saw much of my hometown, my home state, and what you're getting wrong about Appalachia. My home exists in the narrow months of upcoming elections, or as the scapegoat for the national problems we rarely discuss. We are flyover country, existing to win elections, invoke pity, or store decay from a safe distance. It is as Ronald Eller wrote, we know Appalachia exists because we need it to define what we are not. It is the other America because the very idea of Appalachia convinces us of the righteousness of our own lives. I have a lot of problems with my hometown. I often feel helpless watching many around me praising the forces destroying the land and the people around them. I am angry that so much of our history was hidden from us, and by how willing we are to submit to a narrative that exploits us and others. At the same time, as someone who lives outside of my hometown now, I am disheartened to speak with others and hear them say that people from my home state are somehow both separate from the country and the sole source and representation of the country's problems. I remember being filled with irritation as I watched endless book clubs exchange hillbilly elegy, declaring it to be the diagnosis of our national woes. Appalachia, the Midwest, they were Trump country and deserving of our derision and anger. No activists, no queer people, no people of color, none of the people the book clubs told themselves they were standing up for could possibly live there, and therefore no self-reflection was needed. According to the national narrative, solving racism, homophobia, poverty, and other ills was as simple as bleeding the people who lived in the wrong areas out, and those people were somehow never the ones in power, those sequestered in wealthy areas, those writing policy in cosmopolitan cities, those comfortable business owners. Casting Appalachia and other flyover places in the part of the harried and forgotten white everyman, whose only role, as Elizabeth Catt writes, is to bring ruin on his countrymen and selfishly move our nation backward, serves another purpose, though. This casting removes agency and therefore responsibility and power in one fell swoop from people like those in my hometown. It also often skates over the history of activism in the region. When politicians describe coal and flyover country alternately as the heart of the nation or the everyman, they elide the history of violence, the forcible removal of people from the land they inhabit, the machine guns fired at activist families, the laws written to disenfranchise, imprison, and crush. If the narrative mentions how much corporations own and how little they contribute, it is only to lament that more do not strike out against the companies in the modern day. It does not provide the historical context. The narrative does not mention how in earlier years, those identified as most in need of quote-unquote benevolent development, and therefore most likely to be evicted, were those closest to what would later become a national park, and therefore prime location for resorts. The narrative ignores the activists charged with criminal acts for advocating for land rights and economic security. The development of flyover towns into abandoned places and people to pity or revile started early, and its effects are seen today. The effects are separated from the cause so thoroughly, though, that even people living in these places buy the myth. As a teen, I looked to escape from my hometown. I looked down on my town because that was the only way I thought I could get out and make it somewhere else, somewhere that stood a chance of changing, somewhere that wasn't decaying. And what you're getting wrong about Appalachia, when Kat told the story of modern activism in the mountains, I thought of my own experience protesting Nestle in my hometown. Kat describes an organized march against mountaintop removal that was met with derision and anger from counter-protesters. Go home, they told activists, not realizing that the activists were Appalachian too. When we lined up on the side of the street to protest Nestle coming to our small town to mine our aquifers, we were met with similar rage. Now, years later, this company has provided little in the way of work, but has gladly drained the water. I wish Kat had spent more time talking about how that transformation happened, how decades of economic upheaval and violence led to this reality, this perception by even those who live there that activists don't exist where they are, or at least not activists who have any real power. At the same time, I think of how many express the effects of their oppression as a feeling of abandonment, and how we often rail against those who have left us even as we abandon each other and others more badly affected by the same policies. I wonder how we can revive solidarity. I wish more recognized that fighting oppression is not an either-or, but a yes and that solidarity is the surest way to get out of the quagmire. I wish my questioning didn't make an outsider of me in the place that raised me. I wish more of us remembered our history, that rednecks were framed as ignorant not because of their tractors or their choice of drink, but because they stood up to powerful industries. The What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia is framed as a rebuttal to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, and it is true Kat dedicates a section of the short book to dismantling Vance's points. The true purpose of the book is to begin reclamation of Appalachia. Through sharing history, Kat intends to create a new beginning, one where Appalachians can define themselves.